I recently moved back to the area I was born in. It was 55 years ago. And I remember growing up at that time. One of the things I remember is that we used to walk to school. Back in those days, schools were close enough, and frankly, school it was safe enough to walk to school and back. In fact, the only danger really was getting wet, falling in the river that we had to cross to get to school. Of course, we wouldn't walk across the established bridges. We were young and foolish. So you would walk across the rocks, across logs, across trees that had fallen, and therefore that was the only danger you really faced, was slipping off as you found a new way across and getting wet. And I also remember back in those days, there was a legend, a story about a park that was named after a dog. The park was called Charlie's Park. And whilst people used to talk about it around me, I never really knew where it was. The legend was that Charlie was a small dog and belonged to a family that also lived in this area. Charlie got older, Charlie went blind, and Charlie, in her old age, started to get unwell and eventually died. But the park called Charlie's Park was where this family used to take Charlie to. It was a big, wide open park with very little to bump into. And, uh, and whilst I never knew where the park was, I knew of the story. Anyway, like I said, I've just moved back to the area and I was out with some friends at a local sports club and we were talking about it. I brought up Charlie's Park and one of my old school friends who was there said he knew exactly where the park was. In fact, he said that the family who Charlie belongs to still lived in the area. They played a regular role, or they still play a regular role cleaning up the park, along with others. There are many that clean up the area around here. But the reason that they cleaned up the park was in case Charlie visited. Charlie was dead now, but in case Charlie visited, they wanted Charlie to come back to a clean park that she remembered. And what a beautiful story about a family and about Charlie. I remember leaving that afternoon after meeting with my mates, and there were three things that I was grateful for. One, that I now had the story, I now knew where the park was. The story was closed in terms of knowing what the full legend was. I was also grateful that there was still this family that many, many years later are still involved in keeping this area clean. And the park that I walked through, I learned that I used to walk through that park every day on the way to and from school. Just didn't know that was Charlie's Park. And I still walk through Charlie's Park, and it is still clean. And the third thing I was grateful for was the legend of Charlie, that even in her old age, even blind, even really ill at times, after Charlie had died, she had inspired this story, this legend. What an amazing dog she must have been. There's something worth thinking about.